Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our astrological festival. Today, we are very happy and honored to have Bernie Ashman with us. Thank you very much, Bernie, for giving us a little bit of your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So, as we do with all of our interviews, I'd love to know how your interest in astrology started.
Sure. Great question. It actually began in 1973 when I came upon a book by the Frenchman Dane Rudyard, The Astrology of Personality, in a bookstore. And I sat down with that book for about 2 hours and walked out of there with it. And I never looked back. I was just completely, you could say, captured. And I just continued reading some other people's books. And and then I started doing charts pretty early, probably around 1974, so about 50 years ago. I have to say, I was really wanting to do this interview because I used the Placidus house system, and the Italian monk of the 17th century, developed it. So it was just a pretty incredible feeling to be doing this. And I use that house system because of the way I found of its accuracy. But I got into it rather excitedly because in college I studied a lot of psychology at the University of Florida in the early 1970s. But I thought something just felt like was missing. And astrology was the extra ingredient I really needed. And then I got into archetypes from Carl Jung, and I thought it really just fit astrology really well. And then I just kept going from there. So um, just being around different people that were in the field, it really helped me develop my own style. I always tell people sooner or later when you get into this, you're going to find, the different techniques that work for you. And I feel I'm really grateful that so many people let me do their charts early. So it gave me a lot of experience early. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Excellent.
So, how would you describe your approach to astrology?
Yes, I'm I guess you would say it's very psychologically oriented, but very spiritually oriented at the same time. I really try to encourage people that I work with,
Mhm.
as far as clients go, to just give them different options for the birth chart they were born with, just to interpret it in a way that I'm not trying to tell them what to do, but just to explain what I see. If I'm doing current cycles, it's pretty much the same approach for me. Just trying to guide people if that's what they're looking for. A lot of times people just want things confirmed, the direction they're going in, or sometimes they're not really sure what they're doing at a particular point in time. So I would just say I'm a very open astrologer. I'm not really dogmatic that you have to do it any particular way, because I'm sure even in Italy, there's probably different styles.
Yeah.
The United States, even, you could go across from one region to another, and you'll see some overlap, people doing a lot of the same things. But mine is very intuitive. I'm just an intuitive guy. Um, Sometimes I describe myself as an intuitive who became an astrologer, but astrology just fit me because of just the way my own brain works. So, um, people say that they keep coming back to me because they like my intuitive side and just the way I interpret it so they can put it to work for themselves, basically. So that's kind of the way I operate.
Great. And so, how do you think that plays into your consultations with clients? How does that help you interpret their chart?
Yeah. When I look at a chart, I've done thousands of them, and I'm going to see charts that are similar at times. And I never assume that everybody does things the same way. I'm a Sagittarius, but I've seen so many people, not necessarily philosophers or writers, or, into the metaphysical world, but they still maybe have a strong sense of humor. They love to travel. They still are very good advisors in their own way. So when I work with clients, I keep an open mind. Um, I don't assume because somebody has a strong placement of a particular planet, like Saturn. Let's just say like they have a Sun Saturn conjunction or a Moon Saturn conjunction, for example. I don't assume that they've always had problems with that. Some people are just very career oriented. They're very focused. So, and they've learned to live with it. They've figured it out. So I never think in terms of somebody, when I look at a chart, I just see it as something almost like a mandala, just energy. Um, and when I teach astrology, it's pretty much the same way for me. I encourage people to just think of a chart as like a vast ecosystem with a lot of energy in it. So, and when I work with clients, I just pretty much try to keep a positive attitude. Um, that, I mean, there's enough negativity in the world. I just try to, you know, give them a positive approach because a lot of people are really looking for that, especially right now. Um,
Yes.
I work with a lot of creative people that are in the arts, music, art. They're therapists. Um, so some are traditional therapists, some are new age. And I guess the main thing for me is to continue just encouraging people to develop their own evolutionary growth, their own creative growth. And I get a lot, just like any other astrologer, I mean, people are often asking about relationships, careers, how to get better at just using certain things that are in their own chart. Some of my clients are very experienced in astrology. Some don't know a thing about it, and they don't want to know anything about it because it's too complicated. You know how the language is. So it's the symbols are powerful, and there's just so many different ways that they can be expressed. So I hope that was clear enough.
It was. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you worked to develop a software, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
I'd love to know more about it and how did you go about creating it and what is it that you can do actually with it?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you asked me that question. Um, I was asked by Matrix Software around the year 2000 um, to develop a past life program for them because they didn't have one. And it was really an interesting experience for me, one of the most magical I've ever had. I was doing the outline for them at my home, and something just looked wrong with it. And I looked down at my own chart and I saw a past life chart inside of it. And I thought maybe I would present it to them just to see if they would go for it. And they absolutely loved it. In that chart, it's a clockwise house system. In the regular charts, they're counterclockwise, the houses, one, around to 12. In the chart that I invented, the 12th house becomes the ascendant. The second house becomes the 11th house becomes the second house, and you get all the way around to your usual first house, it becomes the 12th house. There's a shift in the way you look at it.
Right.
What it does, it just gives another, you could say like another lens to look through, to just see how it might operate. Like in my chart, instead of being Pisces rising with the traditional chart, which I'm very much, you could say there's a lot of traits with me with Pisces rising. But when I saw Aquarius rising on my 12th house, it made perfect sense. Even transits that would land on it, like I invented this chart, believe it or not, when Uranus landed when Uranus was in Aquarius at that time, and it landed on my 12th house, is when I invented this chart. The thing I thought was really exciting about it, it was just a different way of maybe giving people a clarity about their past lives. I'm real big in the nodes of the moon, that particular, part of astrology. So you could actually place them in this past life chart and you'll still be in the same signs, but they'll be in different houses. So um, I just finished writing a book with somebody I've mentored. Carmen Turner Schott is an astrologer in the US. And we have a book coming out on the nodes of the moon called The Magical Nodes of the Moon through Collective Ink in England. It's going to be officially released in August. Uh, It's already on Amazon, believe it or not. Boy, people really get these books out quick now, don't they? But anyway, the main thing is it's just another shift. You could say just another technique. I always encourage people to check out different techniques. I did. You just sort of gravitate toward the techniques that work for you. So it's not that I use this every time I do get past life questions, this particular chart, but sometimes it might help a person, just to read the software interpretation. It became a written report. So um, does that make sense?
Yes.
Basically. Okay.
So, would you describe yourself as a pastime astrologer? Like,
I
as
say
would you say that is your main focus?
yes. Oh, totally. Um, yeah, that's all I do now. It's been like that for quite a while. Um, yeah, and not everybody does. Some people, might be doing it part-time. Um, Whatever you have time for and whatever your interest is. But I'm completely immersed in it now, from writing about it, from doing lectures about it. I've done over the years, and I certainly just keep working with clients. They just keep wanting me to do charts, and I continue to do them because I really love doing it. I love helping people.
That's
Um, there's a counselor deep inside of me that keeps getting drawn out by people. So, um, and people often figure these things out for themselves, but a lot of times, we just need some input. And I
right.
think astrologers around the world are doing that in just a magical way. Maybe there's even a renaissance going on right now with just, in different, all over the world with this stuff. But yeah, I'm a full-time person, to
Right.
give you the short answer.
Well, thank you. So how do you think that knowing, having knowledge of our past lives can help us in our current life? Like,
Well, yeah, excellent question. We bring in my opinion,
yes.
past life patterns, and I've written about it, in two past life books. Um, and the main focus for me is just describing what those past life patterns are so people can integrate the energy into the current life. It's not that we want to keep being blocked by something that maybe is blocking us. Sometimes people have totally mastered a past life theme and are taking it into their creativity or their decision making. So it's not like people don't, you could say, realize what these patterns are. I've done a lot of work at just identifying them for people that I work with. And usually it rings a bell for people. It just gives them, just you could say, a different perspective on it if I interpret it a certain way. Um, it's always interesting to hear back from people when I give them what am seeing and feeling about it, how they react to it. Um, because that means a lot to me too, to hear what other people are saying, whether it's during a consultation or however that works. But anyway, the main thing, the short answer would be, it's just an empowering energy when you tap into these past life patterns. A lot of people still feel the south node of the moon, the one that looks like an upside down pair of headphones, and is a strong past life pattern. And I always tell people, you have to balance the nodes of the moon, the north and the south. And I have a south node in Scorpio that's been tremendous for research. It's really helped me understand what I'm doing here. And so when I see a south node in the chart, I never assume that that's something negative, because you've got to balance the north and the south node anyway. But the main thing is just getting a more clear understanding about the shadow side of a past life pattern, just so you can bring it more into the light and just feel better, about the incarnation you have.
Right. So, you would say that it is all, past life and the concept of karma, they're very intertwined. I mean, you can say, oh, this is a question. Could we say they're one and the same?
Yeah. I think you have to be careful though with karma. Um, because sometimes we assume because something's karmic that it either can't be overcome or it's going to continue to get in our way. The main thing about the past life pattern, if you even want to, it's fine to label it that way, though, in my opinion, because I use that language, that it can be a karmic theme that we've come in. I have a Saturn that powerfully aspects my nodes of the moon. And there came a point when I realized that I would have to learn how to focus myself if I was ever going to get into something and really get good at it, to be disciplined in it. But I didn't want to get depressed if I wasn't able to learn something or be stuck. So um, probably you can always find some karma with certain planets, Saturn, Pluto. Um, but you're right. There is a correlation of past life patterns and karma. They are karmic themes for sure.
Yeah. And so, talking a little bit more about your journey with astrology, do you
Yes,
and do you feel like the study and the practice of astrology has given you purpose in your life?
completely. It really turned my whole life around in the 1970s, um, quickly. It gave me a deep understanding of how my own mental processes worked the more I got into it. And it actually helped me in my relationships with people, um, where I needed to either be more patient, um, be a good listener, as well as a good communicator. Um, it, um, it actually gave me a really good perspective of where I came from, past life wise. The first time I started doing charts, I really got the feeling that I was looking at more than one life for people. And I really felt that about myself. So it really pretty much showed how, for myself, how my mental processes worked, my emotional processes worked, um, just how, in a way, how my creative processes really worked. I think it really put me on some kind, a lot of astrologers like to use the term evolutionary path now.
Yes.
Um, Not everybody, but there's a certain group, certain thinking now about that. And I've been like that for a long, long time, that evolving. I'm always telling people a lot of my main purpose in doing charts is to help people just evolve, the way that they want to evolve. And for myself, to answer your question, it was like a mirror put up when I got into astrology that I think it really gave me so much clarity about just to look inside a bit, you
Mm.
for the most part.
So, in a way, it was both like a look into yourself and into the world as a whole, because
Yes.
really when, talking about astrology, we always focus and bring out the general perspective it gives us about the whole universe.
Yes.
When we think about the sky, we don't really think about it as limited, the
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
about
Yeah. The
that,
inner and outer for sure.
yes, exactly. So about that, and also about, time. How do you think that your approach has changed over the years since you were a beginner and
Sure.
nowadays?
Boy, that's another excellent question. Um, when I first started out, um, I would have to say my intuitive side was strong at the beginning,
Right.
in far as learning and picking it up. And I was really grateful that I understood, I was really picking up on the language pretty quick, though it took a while to understand certain houses in the chart. For instance, I've got a loaded eighth house. That's where my sun is. My south node is there. I've got a Sun Jupiter conjunction in the eighth, and I have Mercury and Scorpio in the eighth with the south node in Scorpio. So to me, the eighth house, I for a lot of people, the eighth and the 12 houses seem to take longer. And sometimes you need to get a little bit older, in my opinion, before you understand them. I was 25 years old when I got into astrology. I hadn't even had a Saturn return yet. So I was a young guy.
Yeah.
And I was learning a lot about just how to live, in the world. So It's interesting how your life experiences can help you become a better astrologer.
Yeah.
As you go through like a Saturn return around age 29, 28 and a half, 29, or when you go into other planetary movements that you might have in your own chart. So for me, it was an evolving kind of thing to just get better at interpretation, um, to just know, say, like what a transit might mean in a person, in my own chart and in somebody else's chart. What really helped me was doing a lot of charts. I was just very fortunate. I was in a meditation group of about 1,000 people. And when the word got out that I was an astrologer, I was just getting so many opportunities to do charts. So, um, and I tell people the more you do them, the more the language starts to speak to you. So, and it does take a certain amount of study. It doesn't happen overnight, as you probably know, and many people find out. And you can get frustrated in the beginning because there's so many details. There's so many different ways a planet, a sign, a house, an aspect can operate. But as you get into it, you just start to see how to interpret them. You know, the more practice, you have to be patient and really practice at this, as you probably know yourself, I'm sure. Um, but for me, the passion just kept moving me forward for this particular subject. So I just really wanted to be able to see the whole chart. One of the hardest things is to see a whole chart. I can see a whole chart now in less than a minute, but that didn't happen like, pronto. Um, it took a while to get to that point. So when people start seeing whole charts, they're fascinated because then you start to see how the elements, how each house fits together, how the whole person is really there. Um, so it's a beautiful language. Yes.
It's a beautiful story, really, and it ties back into the seeing the big picture, like we talked about. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would like to know, from your perspective, how do you view the future of astrology? Because obviously you've embraced, technological advancements, you created a software. Like, how do you think it would look in the future?
I, well, it's been interesting. When I first started out, people said, well, you're probably going to just get certain kinds of clients. That, not everybody would be that warmed up to astrology. But now, I mean, I get people from all walks of life, and most astrologers do, because it's been really widely accepted in numerous world cultures. So, how do I see it? Right now, Pluto is in Aquarius for the first time in centuries, so hundreds of years. This year, if it's going to move in and out of it. It'll be, it'll back up. It went in January 20th. Then at some point around September 1st to November 19th, it'll back up into retrograde back into Capricorn, but then it's going to go into Aquarius for 20 years. I think what's been happening is when you just look at it from that perspective, there's going to be all kinds of, I would say, advancements in it. To me, the more people who are practicing astrology, there's something collective about it,
Yeah.
uh, because so many people are doing it. You know, Carl Jung and the whole thing of the collective unconscious for people to tap into it, all the symbols, the archetypes. And I think you could say, even in a similar way, there's so many of us now practicing this, and there's a lot of young astrologers now that I'm seeing. I'm mentoring them, and many I'm not, and they're just out there now all over the world. So I think it's going to keep advancing in its own way. Um, whether there's a new technique of some sort, there could always be a new technique. It's going to happen. Astrologers are pretty inventive, so we just have that in our DNA.
Yeah.
It just seems like, don't you agree?
I do, definitely, yes. And so, since you mentioned the movement of Pluto into Aquarius, I was meaning to ask you, what do you think it's going to bring forth for us? Are there any areas of change you think are going to be specifically impacted by this?
Yeah. Um, well, I think it's already happened even before it went into Aquarius, because the world is so interdependent now, like on the economies. Like as much as we complain about China, for instance, and China complains about the United States, but China and is so invested in us money-wise, and we're so invested in them. So it's like we have to get along one way or another. And I think that's true. It's going to become even more true as time goes on. I almost wonder if some of the alliances of countries might change, as allies, because Aquarius has to do with groups. And even Pluto can be who is your ally, if you want to interpret it that way. So that's probably something that's going to happen. Um, it just seems like people are catching on about wanting to evolve.
Yes.
Um, it doesn't mean everybody feels that way, but I think there's a growing collective thing going on. And that's why a lot of people are seeking out help in alternative ways. It's been going on for a while now, but it's going to get even stronger, I would think. Um, there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence now, you know, and it's probably going to be something else. There's going to be a lot of questions about it, how it's being used. It's already starting to come up. And with Pluto and Aquarius, it's probably going to even have people, with more questions about it. But as far as the world goes, I would just imagine there's going to be changes that we're not even thinking about, at this point in time. As people sometimes are very hard to predict, um, how what their thinking is going to be.
Right.
Sometimes I'm amazed that we get along as well as we do in this world, even though if you listen to the news, everything seems really completely negative.
Yes.
How much of it you can swallow even at one time. So um, I think it's going to trend for more cooperation for survival in some ways for, in this world for countries.
Right.
And on the individual level, it wouldn't surprise me at all that just more and more people are going to be wanting to just investigate more about interpreting symbols. I think that's going to be something that's just going to be on the increase. I don't see that going away. I think it's just too far along now.
So we can expect, um, discovery. And, if we were to sum it up, like very briefly, we could say, expect the unexpected, right?
Perfect. Yeah, that captures it. Well said.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
totally.
So, my last question for you today is, what advice would you give to rookie astrologers of today?
Just be open. Be open. Um, it doesn't matter if you're a Vedic astrologer and use the sidereal system, or if you're like me, I've always used the Western system, the tropical zodiac. Just be open to different techniques. I remember I talked about some of my techniques on somebody's Facebook page one day, and somebody was complaining that it wasn't the sidereal zodiac, somebody who used it. And the guy that ran the thing butted in and said to the guy, be open. He's just trying to tell you his technique. And I think that's really what it comes down to. If you're new, I encourage people to check different things out. When I did a book, Sun Signs and Past Lives, Your Soul's Evolutionary Purpose, it was published in 2010 by Llewellyn. I used the Decan technique, the Decan, the different 10 degrees of each sign to tune into past life patterns. And it doesn't mean everybody would choose to do that. So I tell young astrologers, um, stay hungry, because if you think you found it and there's no other way to do this, you're very mistaken. I've just seen so many different ways that people can make use of this. They don't have to use the Placidus house system that I've used all these years. Maybe they're going to use the Koch, Koch, or they're going to use a different one, equal house system. If you're successful with it and are really helping yourself or helping other people, um, that's the best thing to go by, in my opinion. But if you're young and just starting out, like I did back in 1973, I was like, just stayed very open. I would just go hear different, I would go to astrology conferences eventually just to get different approaches, just see how different people were using it. Um, I do a lot with relocation astrology. I get asked a lot about moving from one place to another and, setting up the chart for another location. And I also use astrocartography and I use local space astrology, which I love because that's just taking your planet lines in the direction you're just walking right out of your chart. These are just different techniques that people, there's so much available now. I didn't even really get into local space until I got on software in the late 80s. So there's so many different ways that you can use your own creative talent in this subject, just finding the right avenue for yourself. And it's an evolving experience. And the more you start doing charts, you actually, to me, find, your own style anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? What you're
Yes.
going to use. So, yeah, I just tell people when they're starting, be patient, practice, and eventually it's going to happen. You're going to start to really be able to read charts. It's like learning to fly, just take off.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I also think we can apply that to all areas of our life, Keep
Yes.
curiosity alive, keep studying. That's always positive.
Yes. That's so true. Yeah,
And
very much.
yeah, I can only thank you very much again for joining us. And I
Oh,
hope
thank you.
you had a great time as I did.
Oh, yeah, I really enjoyed this. Thanks for the opportunity. I love doing this.
Thank you very much.
Tim.